The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Elder Vexstar stood at the large window of the council chamber, watching his people go about their daily work. The Zephyrians moved with quiet purpose between the metal buildings and mining equipment. Their blue skin gleamed in the sunlight, and their 4 arms worked with practiced skill. It had been 20 years since his people first came to this world. 20 years since they fled their dying home planet and begged the humans for help. The memory still felt fresh in his mind. Back then, the humans had seemed so strange. They walked on only 2 legs and had just 2 arms each. Their pale skin looked soft compared to Zephyrian hide, but they had kind eyes, especially the woman who spoke for them. Ambassador Kate Sullivan had been her name. She was a small human with brown hair and a warm smile. When Vexstar first met her, he thought she looked too young to speak for an entire planet. But when she talked, her words carried weight. "We will help your people," she had said in the meeting room aboard her ship. "Earth and the Zephyrian Commonwealth will stand together. If you ever need us, just call. We will come." The treaty they signed was simple but strong. Each species would help the other in times of great danger. The humans would share some of their technology. The Zephyrians would share their knowledge of deep space mining. Both sides would defend each other against attacks. For the first few years, things went well. Human ships visited the colony often. They brought supplies and news from other worlds. Some humans even stayed to work alongside the Zephyrians in the mines. The 2 species learned from each other, but as time passed, the visits became less frequent. The humans seemed busy with their own problems. They were exploring new star systems and building colonies of their own. The last human ship had left the colony 3 years ago. Many Zephyrians began to wonder if the humans still remembered them. Some spoke quietly about the old treaty being just empty words. Even Vexstar sometimes doubted, though he tried not to show it. A soft chime pulled him from his thoughts. His aide, a young Zephyrian named Narration, entered the chamber. Her face looked worried. "Elder," she said, "we are receiving a message from the outer system sensors." Vexstar turned from the window. "What kind of message?" "Ships, Elder. Many ships. They are not human vessels." A cold feeling settled in Vexstar's chest. He followed Narration to the communication center. The main screen showed a star map of their system. Red dots marked the incoming ships. There were so many red dots that they looked like a swarm of angry insects. The communication officer, an older Zephyrian named Kexmore, looked up from his station. "Elder, they are sending a message. It is in the common galactic language." "Put it on the main screen," Vexstar ordered. The screen changed to show a frightening alien face. The creature had gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones. Its eyes were black and cold. When it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "I am War Master Krell Fox of the Vorthan Empire. You will surrender your mining technology to us. You have 1 standard day to decide. Refuse, and we will take what we want from the ashes of your world." The message ended. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the equipment. Vexstar stared at the now blank screen. His people looked to him for answers he did not have. The Vorthans were known throughout the galaxy. They were conquerors who took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. In the past year, they had attacked 17 colonies. None had survived. How many ships? Vexstar asked quietly. Kexmore checked his instruments. 200, Elder. Maybe more. They have dreadnoughts. Vexstar felt his 4 hearts sink. The colony had only 6 old patrol ships for defense. They were fast and good for chasing pirates, but they would be like insects against Vorthan warships. "Send word to all section leaders," he said. "Tell them to prepare the emergency plans. Move the children to the deep shelters." Narration stepped forward. Elder, should we contact Earth? The room went quiet again. Everyone knew what she was asking. Some of the older Zephyrians shook their heads. They had given up hope of human help long ago. The humans have their own problems, said Counselor Nextar. They have not visited us in years. Why would they come now? The treaty, Lyrason said. They promised to help us. Promises, Nextar replied sadly. Easy to make, hard to keep. Vexstar looked around the room at his people. He saw fear in their eyes, but also a small spark of hope. They wanted to believe the humans would come. Deep in his own heart, he wanted to believe it too. Send the message, he said finally. Use the emergency frequency from the old treaty. Kexmore nodded and began working at his station. The message would take time to reach Earth. Even if the humans got it right away, their fastest ships would need days to reach the colony. The Vorthans would not wait that long. Vexstar walked back to the window. Outside, his people were already beginning to move. Families hurried toward the underground shelters. Workers shut down the mining equipment and gathered emergency supplies. Everyone moved with quiet efficiency, but he could see the fear in the way they held their children close. Elder, Larison said softly, do you think they will come? Vexstar was quiet for a long moment. He remembered Ambassador Sullivan's face when she made her promise. He remembered the warmth in her voice and the firm way she shook his hand. I do not know, he said honestly, but we must try. We must have faith. The message to Earth went out into the darkness of space, carrying with it the hopes of an entire colony. Somewhere far away, human ears might hear their call for help, but as Vexstar watched the red dots on the scanner grow larger, he wondered if faith would be enough. The Vorthans were coming, and time was running out. In the communication center. The emergency beacon sent its signal again and again, like a heartbeat in the void. Each pulse carried the same simple message. Help us. Please, remember your promise. The fate of the Zephyrian colony now hung on a 20-year-old treaty and the hope that humans still kept their word. War Master Krell Fox stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher. Through the large viewing window, he could see his fleet spread out across space like a dark cloud. 200 ships of war, each one built for destruction. The Vorthan leader was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like old leather. Scars covered his arms and face, each one a mark of battles won. His black eyes showed no mercy as he studied the small planet ahead. Report, he growled to his second-in-command. Commander Velinix stepped forward. Like all Vorthans, he looked hungry and dangerous. The planet has 6 small ships for defense. Nothing that can threaten us. Their weapons are old and weak. Krell Fox smiled, showing sharp teeth. And their response to our message? Nothing yet, War Master. But we detected a transmission sent toward human space. Humans? Krell Fox laughed. The sound was harsh and ugly. Let them call for help. The humans are too far away and too weak to matter. By the time any help arrives, we will have taken what we want. A Vorthan fleet moved closer to the planet. Each ship was painted black, with red markings that looked like blood. The largest ships were dreadnoughts, massive vessels with enough firepower to level cities. Smaller cruisers and destroyers filled the space around them. On the planet below, the Zephyrians watched the approaching doom. In the colony's main shelter, hundreds of families huddled together. The shelter was deep underground, carved from solid rock. It was the safest place on the planet, but it felt like a tomb. Lyrison moved between the groups of people, trying to keep everyone calm. She was young for a Zephyrian, only 30 years old. Her blue skin was darker than most, and her 4 arms moved with quick, nervous energy. The children need to stay quiet, she told the adults. Sound carries through the rock. We cannot let the enemy know how many of us are here. An elderly Zephyrian woman named Telana held her grandchild close. Will the humans really come? She asked. Lyrison wanted to say yes, but she could not lie. Elder Vexstar believes they will. We must trust in that. But inside, she was not sure. She had been just a child when the humans first came to their world. She remembered their strange appearance and their odd way of speaking. They seemed friendly, but also very different from her people. Above ground, Elder Vexstar stood in the communication center. The room was almost empty now. Most of his people were in the shelters. Only a few essential workers remained at their posts. The main screen showed the Vorthan fleet getting closer. Each red dot on the display meant death and destruction. Vexstar counted them again, hoping he had made a mistake the first time. 200 ships, maybe more. Any word from Earth? He asked Kexmore. The communication officer shook his head. Nothing, Elder. The message reached human space hours ago, but we have received no reply. Vexstar felt his hope growing smaller. Perhaps the other council members were right. Perhaps the humans had forgotten about them. It had been 20 years, after all. Governments changed. People forgot old promises. On his flagship, Krellthox studied reports about the Zephyrian colony. His intelligence officers had been watching the planet for weeks. They knew about the mining operations, the defense systems, and the population. 12,000 Zephyrians, Commander Velinix reported. Most are civilians. They have some security forces, but nothing trained for real war. Good. Krellthox said. Fear makes them easier to control. Have our ships begin the demonstration. The order went out across the Vorthan fleet. Several destroyers moved toward the asteroid belt near the planet. The asteroids were covered with mining equipment and automated systems. Thousands of Zephyrians had worked there over the years. Bright flashes lit up space as the Vorthan ships opened fire. One by one, the mining stations exploded. Each explosion sent debris spinning through space. Years of hard work disappeared in moments. In the colony's communication center, Vexstar watched the destruction with a heavy heart. Those stations had fed his people and provided resources for trade. Now they were gone. A new message came from the Vorthans. Krellthox's scarred face appeared on the screen again. You see how easily we destroy your property, the War Master said. Your mining stations are nothing to us. Your ships are nothing to us. Your people are nothing to us. Surrender now, and we will let some of you live as slaves. Refuse, and we will kill everyone. The message ended. Vexstar stared at the blank screen. Around him, the few remaining workers waited for his decision. He could see the fear in their eyes. Elder, Kexmore said quietly, what do we do? Before Vexstar could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the colony. The defense systems had detected incoming missiles. The Vorthans were not waiting for an answer. All remaining personnel to the shelters, Vexstar ordered. Seal the blast doors. The workers ran for the exits. Soon, only Vexstar and Kexmore remained in the communication center. The old communication officer looked at his elder with sad eyes. You should go to the shelter too, Kexmore said. I will stay and monitor the frequencies. In case the humans reply. Vexstar shook his head. We stay together. If this is the end, we face it with dignity. The first explosions shook the colony. Vorthan missiles struck the outer buildings, turning metal and concrete into fire and smoke. The lights flickered as power systems overloaded in the deep shelter. Larison felt the vibrations through the rock. The children cried, and the adults held each other tight. The sound of destruction echoed down from above like thunder. They are destroying everything, someone whispered. The humans will come, Larison said, trying to sound confident. They promised. But with each explosion, that promise seemed more and more like a dream not above them. The Vorthen fleet moved into attack. Formation. Krell-Thox watched the bombardment with satisfaction. The Zephyrian defense satellites had been destroyed in the first few minutes. Their patrol ships had tried to fight back, but 3 were already burning wrecks. War Master, Commander Velinix, reported the planet's orbital defenses are eliminated. We can begin the ground assault. Excellent, Krell-Thox said. Prepare the landing craft, but continue the bombardment. I want them to understand that resistance is hopeless. More missiles fell on the colony. Buildings collapsed, and fires spread through the streets. The Zephyrians had built their colony to last, but nothing could stand against such overwhelming force. In the communication center, Vexstar and Kexmor watched their world burn. The screens showed fires everywhere. Emergency systems sent reports of damage and casualties. Still no word from Earth, Kexmor said. Vexstar nodded sadly. Deep in his heart, he had known this moment would come. The humans were not coming. His people would have to face the end alone, but he would not give up completely. Not yet. Keep sending the signal, he told Kexmor. As long as we have power, keep calling for help. The emergency beacon continued its lonely cry into space, carrying a message that might never be heard. In the shelter below, Zephyrian families held each other close and waited for the end. The Vorthen storm was here, and it showed no mercy. The bombardment had been going on for 3 hours. In the deep shelter, the Zephyrian families could feel each explosion through the rock walls. Dust fell from the ceiling with every impact. The lights flickered as power systems struggled to keep working. Lyrison moved through the crowded shelter, checking on the families. The children had stopped crying, but that was not a good sign. They sat quietly with wide, frightened eyes. Even the youngest ones seemed to understand that something terrible was happening. How much longer can the shelter hold? Asked Helana, the elderly woman. Lyrison tried to smile. The shelter is very strong. It was built to protect us from asteroid impacts and solar storms. We are safe here. But she was not sure if that was true. The explosions seemed to be getting closer and stronger. Sometimes the whole shelter shook like an earthquake was happening. Above ground, the colony was dying. Most of the buildings had been destroyed or damaged. Fires burned everywhere, sending black smoke into the sky. The Vorthens had been very thorough in their destruction. In the communication center, Elder Vexstar watched the reports come in. Power was failing across the colony. The water treatment plant had been hit. The main generator was offline. Elder, Kexmor said, I am losing contact with the outer sections. The communication towers are being destroyed one by one. Vexstar nodded. Grimly, soon they would be completely cut off from the outside world. No one would know what happened to them. The last 3 Zephyrian patrol ships were still fighting, but it was hopeless. Captain Mortek commanded the lead ship, the Swift Current. He had been a pilot for 30 years, but he had never faced anything like this. Enemy destroyer closing on our position, his weapons officer reported. Fire everything we have, Mortek ordered. The Swift Current's guns blazed, sending energy beams toward the Vorthen ship. The beams struck the enemy's shields and scattered harmlessly. The Vorthen destroyer was 10 times larger and had much better armor. The enemy ship returned fire. Massive cannons sent death across space. The Swift Current's shields collapsed under the first hit. The second hit tore through the hull like paper. Hull breach in sections 4 and 5, someone shouted. We are losing atmosphere. Mortek fought to keep his ship flying, but it was no use. Explosions rocked the bridge. Smoke filled the air. Around him, his crew worked desperately to save their dying ship. Captain, the communication officer called out, the other ships are gone. We are. The last one. Mortek closed his eyes for a moment. His friends and fellow pilots were dead. Soon he would join them. At least they had tried to defend their people. Send one final message to the colony, he ordered. Tell them we fought with honor. The message was sent just before another Vorthin. Blast destroyed the swift current. The explosion lit up space for a few seconds, then faded to nothing. The Zephyrians no longer had any ships to defend them. On the Bone Crusher, War Master Krell watched the last enemy ship die. His scarred face showed no emotion. This had been too easy to give him any satisfaction. All orbital resistance eliminated, Commander Velinix reported. We can begin the ground assault whenever you wish. Good, Krell said. But first, let us give them time to think about their situation. Fear is a useful weapon. The bombardment stopped. For the first time in 3 hours, the explosions ended. In the shelter, the Zephyrians looked up at the ceiling, wondering if it was over, but the silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. At least during the attack, they could tell themselves they were still fighting. Now there was nothing but waiting. Lyrison climbed the stairs to the shelter's upper level. Through a small armored window, she could see the colony. Her heart broke at the sight. Everything was destroyed. Buildings were collapsed piles of metal and concrete. Fires burned in the wreckage. The sky was full of Vorthin ships. They hung in the air like black clouds, waiting. She could see smaller craft beginning to separate from the main fleet. Landing ships, carrying soldiers to finish what the bombardment had started. She went back down to the main shelter area. Hundreds of faces looked at her, hoping for good news. She wished she had some to give them. The attack has stopped for now, she said. But enemy ships are preparing to land. An old Zephyrian male named Hexner stood up. He had been a soldier once, many years ago. How many of us are left? He asked. Everyone in the shelters is safe, Lyrison replied. But the surface, there is nothing left up there. The crowd fell silent. Some people began to cry quietly. Others just stared at the floor. They all understood what this meant. Even if they survived the bombardment, they were trapped underground with limited food and water in the communication center. Elder Vexstar made one last attempt to contact the outside world. Emergency power was running low, but the communication system still worked. This is Elder Vexstar of the Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b, he said into the transmitter. We are under attack by Vorthin forces. Our defenses have fallen. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Please remember that we tried to live in peace. He paused, looking at Kexmore. The old communication officer nodded encouragingly. To our friends on Earth, Vexstar continued, we do not blame you for not coming. We know you have your own problems to deal with. But we want you to know that we never forgot your kindness when we first came to this system. You gave us hope when we had none. That meant everything to us. The message went out into space, but Vexstar did not expect anyone to hear it. The communication towers were mostly destroyed. Even if the signal reached space, it would be very weak. Above the planet, the first Vorthin landing craft entered the atmosphere. They were ugly ships, designed for war rather than beauty. Each one carried 50 soldiers armed with heavy weapons. The landing craft came down like falling meteors, their engines burning bright in the dark sky. They aimed for the areas around the shelter entrances. The Vorthins knew exactly where the Zephyrians were hiding. Krell stood on his bridge, watching the landing operation begin. This was the part he enjoyed most. The bombardment was necessary, but impersonal. Now his soldiers would get to see the fear in enemy eyes. Estimated time to complete the ground operation? He asked his staff. 2 hours, War Master, came the reply. Maybe less. The Zephyrians have no military ground forces, only civilian security teams. Excellent. Make sure some of the aliens survive. We need them to operate the mining equipment until we can bring in our own workers." The landing craft touched down around the colony. Ramps lowered, and Vorthan soldiers poured out. They were big creatures, even larger than Zephyrians. Their armor was black metal covered with spikes. Their weapons could punch through thick walls in. The shelter, everyone could hear the sound of the landing craft. The children moved closer to their parents. The adults tried to look brave, but fear showed in their eyes. Elder Vextar came down from the communication center. His people looked to him for leadership, even in this dark hour. He stood in the center of the shelter and raised his forearms for attention. "My friends," he said, "the enemy has landed. They will try to break into our shelters. But we are not helpless. We have emergency supplies that can last for weeks. We have strong doors and thick walls. Most importantly, we have each other." He looked around at all the faces watching him. Young and old, workers and scientists, families and individuals. These were his people, and he would protect them as long as he could. "We may not survive this day," he continued, "but we will face whatever comes with dignity. We will not beg or crawl. We are Zephyrians, and we remember how to be brave." Some of the people stood straighter. Others nodded with determination. Even in the face of certain death, they would not give up their honor. Outside, Vorthan soldiers moved through the ruined colony. They searched for entrances to the underground shelters. When they found them, they would use their heavy weapons to break through. The hunt for the survivors had begun, and time was running out. The Vorthan soldiers had been on the ground for 30 minutes. They moved through the ruined colony like hunters tracking prey. Their heavy boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. Smoke from the fires made the air thick and hard to breathe. Squad leader Grakener stood over one of the shelter entrances. It was a thick metal door built into the side of a hill. His soldiers had found 3 more entrances just like it. The Zephyrians were hiding underground like frightened animals. "Bring the plasma cutters," he ordered. "We will burn through these doors and drag them out." Inside the shelter, the Zephyrians could hear the enemy soldiers above them. Heavy footsteps moved back and forth over their heads. Strange voices spoke in the harsh Vorthan language. Lyrason stood near the main door, listening. The metal was starting to get warm. The enemies were using some kind of cutting tool to break through. "How long will the door hold?" someone asked. "Not long," replied Hexner, the old soldier. "Those are military-grade plasma cutters. They can burn through anything given enough time." Elder Vextar joined them at the door. He placed one of his 4 hands on the warm metal. "Then we prepare for the end," he said quietly. "We meet our fate standing up." But just as the Zephyrians were losing hope, something amazing happened. Far above the planet, space began to ripple and twist. Bright flashes appeared at the edge of the solar system. On the Bone Crusher, a Vorthan sensor operator suddenly sat up straight. "War Master," he called out, "I am detecting massive energy signatures." Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Krellthox turned from watching the ground operation. "What kind of ships? How many?" The operator checked his instruments. Again, his face showed confusion and worry. 50 ships, War Master. Unknown design. They are moving toward us at high speed. 50 ships? Krellthox laughed. Against my 200? They must be fools. But his laughter stopped when the lead ship sent a message across all frequencies. The voice that came through the speakers was clear and strong. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Supreme Fleet. You are attacking our allies in violation of Treaty 7 Alpha. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Krellthox stared at the communication screen. "Humans?" The humans had actually come. He looked at the tactical display showing the incoming ships. They were still far away, but they were moving fast. "Send a reply," he ordered. "Tell them they are outnumbered and should leave while they still can." The message went out, but Admiral Morrison's response was swift and simple. "We do not abandon our friends. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal." Krelthok's anger flared. How dare these soft humans threaten him? His fleet was 4 times larger than theirs. He would crush them and then finish destroying the colony. "All ships, attack formation," he commanded. "Destroy the human fleet." The Vorthan ships began to move, spreading out across space. Their weapons charged, ready to fire. But the humans were not waiting for a formal battle to begin. On the bridge of the SS Leviathan, Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet through the main viewer. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. He had been fighting battles in space for 25 years. "Captain Chun," he said to the woman standing beside him, "signal the attack wings. Begin the assault." Captain Lisa Chun nodded. She commanded the destroyer squadron attached to the fleet. "All wings, this is Thunderstrike. Execute pattern Delta 7. The human ships moved with perfect coordination. They had trained for this kind of battle many times. Each captain knew exactly what to do. Captain Chris Walker of the ESS Valkyrie led the first attack run. His ship was smaller than the Vorthan heavy cruisers, but it was much faster. The Valkyrie darted between enemy ships, like a bird flying through a forest. "Target the big one on the left," Walker told his weapons officer. "Hit them hard and fast." The Valkyrie's guns opened fire. Bright energy beams struck the Vorthan cruisers' shields. But these were not the weak weapons the Vorthans expected. The human guns had been upgraded with new technology. The enemy shields failed after just 3 hits. "Direct hit on their weapon systems," the weapons officer reported. "They are losing power." Commander Amy Foster was piloting an experimental ship called the EC Ghost. It had special equipment that made it nearly invisible to enemy sensors. She brought her ship up behind a group of Vorthan destroyers. "Surprise," she whispered, and opened fire. The Vorthan ships never saw her coming. 3 destroyers exploded in seconds. The others scattered in panic, not knowing where the attack had come from. On the Bone Crusher, Krelthox watched his fleet take damage. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be weak and slow. Instead, they fought like experienced warriors. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Our intelligence said their technology was inferior." Commander Vellings studied the tactical reports. "War Master, their weapons are much more powerful than we expected, and their ships are faster than ours." A new explosion lit up space as another Vorthan ship died. The human fleet was cutting through his forces like a knife through soft meat. Down on the planet, the Vorthan soldiers heard the battle raging above them. Some stopped their work to look up at the sky. Flashes of light marked where ships were. Fighting and dying. Squad leader Grakener pressed his communication device. "Command, what is happening up there?" The reply came through static and interference. "Human fleet ... under attack. Continue mission ... The signal cut out. Grakener looked at his soldiers. They seemed nervous now. The sound of battle above was getting louder. In the shelter, Elder Vextar felt the vibrations through the rock. But these were different from the bombardment. These felt like explosions happening in space, not on the ground. "Something is happening," he told the others. "The pattern of attacks has changed." Kexmore appeared at his side. The old communication officer looked excited. "Elder, I am picking up human military frequencies. They are here. The humans are here." A cheer went up from the Zephyrians in the shelter. Children who had been crying began to smile. Adults hugged each other with joy and relief. "Are you certain?" Vextar asked. Kexmore nodded. "I can hear their ship-to-ship communications. They are fighting the Vorthons right now. Above the planet, Admiral Morrison watched the battle develop. His ships were winning, but the cost was high. The Vorthons had more ships, and they were fighting desperately. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Ryan Black from the sensor station, "we have damaged or destroyed 30 enemy ships. But we have lost 6 of our own." Morrison nodded grimly. Every lost ship meant brave people had died. But they had made a promise to the Zephyrians, and humans kept their promises. "Signal Colonel Hayes," he ordered. "Tell him to begin the ground assault." Far below, Colonel Steve Hayes was already on his way down. His marine landing craft cut through the atmosphere like falling stars. Inside, 50 of Earth's best soldiers prepared for battle. "Listen up," Hayes told his troops. "The Zephyrians are counting on us. We do not let them down." The Marines checked their weapons and equipment. They had trained for this kind of mission. Rescue operations in hostile territory were difficult, but they had done it before. The landing craft touched down near the colony ruins. The ramps dropped, and human soldiers poured out. They wore advanced armor and carried weapons that could punch through Vorthon metal. Grakenar saw them coming and shouted orders to his squad. "Human soldiers, 12 o'clock. Take defensive positions." But the humans did not advance slowly like normal soldiers. They came fast and hard, using the ruins for cover. Their weapons fired with deadly accuracy. Sergeant Kelly Moore led a squad of Marines toward the nearest shelter entrance. She could see Vorthon soldiers trying to cut through the door. Her squad opened fire from behind a collapsed wall. The Vorthons never had a chance. Human weapons were designed to penetrate their armor. In seconds, the enemy squad was eliminated. "Clear the entrance," Moore ordered. "Get those people out of there." Inside the shelter, the Zephyrians heard human voices calling. To them, the sound of plasma cutters had stopped. Instead, there were new voices speaking in accented but understandable Galactic Common. "Zephyrian civilians, this is Sergeant Moore of the Earth Marine Corps. We are here to help you. Please stand back from the door." Elder Vexstar could hardly believe what he was hearing. After all these years, after all their doubts, the humans had actually come. The shelter door opened with a loud clang. Bright light poured in from outside. Silhouetted against the light was a human soldier in advanced armor. She removed her helmet, showing a kind face with brown skin and dark eyes. "Are you Elder Vexstar?" she asked. "I am," he replied, his voice shaking with emotion. "Sir, Admiral Morrison sends his regards. He says to tell you that humans do not break promises to friends." All around the shelter, Zephyrians began to cry with relief and joy. Their children laughed and pointed at the strange but wonderful humans who had come to save them. The tide of battle had turned. Hope had returned to Kepler 442b. The space battle above Kepler 442b had been raging for 2 hours. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESS Leviathan, watching his tactical display. The human fleet was smaller than the Vorthon force, but they were winning through superior technology and tactics. "Status report," he ordered. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Black checked his instruments. "We have destroyed or disabled 80 Vorthon ships. 15 of theirs are retreating. But we have lost 12 of our own." Morrison nodded. Each lost ship hurt, but the mission was succeeding. The Vorthons were learning that humans did not make empty promises. "Signal Captain Rodriguez," Morrison said. "Tell him to execute the final phase." Captain Danny Rodriguez commanded the ESS Stormbreaker, one of the newest ships in the human fleet. He had been waiting for this moment. His ship was equipped with experimental weapons that could punch through even the heaviest armor. "All ships, this is Stormbreaker," he broadcast. "Begin the final assault. Target their command ships." The human fleet moved with deadly precision. Each ship knew its role in the battle plan. They had practiced this attack pattern many times in training. Now they would use it against a real enemy. Captain Helen Torres brought her stealth squadron around the enemy's flank. Her ships were invisible to Vorthan sensors. They struck without warning, hitting supply ships and support vessels. On the bone, Crusher, War Master Krelthox watched his fleet crumble. Ships exploded all around him. His proud armada was being torn apart by a much smaller human force. How is this possible? He demanded. We outnumber them 4-1. Commander Velinix looked up from his station. His face was pale with fear. War Master, their technology is far beyond what we expected. Their weapons are twice as powerful as ours. Their ships are faster and more maneuverable. Another explosion rocked the Bone Crusher as human weapons found their target. The lights flickered, and smoke filled the bridge. Shields down to 30%, someone reported. Hull damage on decks 5 through 8. Krelthox realized he was facing defeat. His great conquest was turning into a disaster, but he was too proud to surrender without a fight. All remaining ships converge on my position, he ordered. We make our stand here. The surviving Vorthan vessels moved toward their flagship. There were only 60 ships left out of the original 200. Many were damaged and barely able to fight. Admiral Morrison saw the enemy formation on his tactical display. Classic defensive circle, he told his staff. They are making their last stand. Order, sir? Asked Captain Sean. Morrison smiled grimly. We finish this. All ships, attack pattern Omega. Hit them from all sides at once. The human fleet spread out in a wide circle around the Vorthan ships. Then they all attacked. Together. Energy beams and missiles converged on the enemy from every direction. The Vorthan shields collapsed under the massive assault. Ship after ship exploded or went dark. The proud fleet that had terrorized 17 colonies was being destroyed. On the planet below, the ground battle was also coming to an end. Colonel Hayes and his Marines had linked up with the Zephyrian survivors. Together, they were driving the Vorthan soldiers back to their landing zones. Sergeant Kelly Moore crouched behind a pile of rubble with Elder Vextar beside her. The old Zephyrian leader insisted on joining the fight, even though he was not a soldier. There, Vextar pointed with one of his 4 arms. More enemy soldiers in that building. Moore nodded and signaled to her squad. They moved forward carefully, using their training to clear the building room by room. The Vorthan soldiers inside were tough fighters, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Lyrison fought alongside Private Tommy Clark, a young Marine from Texas. She had never held a weapon before, but she learned quickly. Her 4 arms gave her an advantage in handling equipment. Behind you, she warned Clark, spotting a Vorthan soldier trying to sneak up on them. Clark spun around and fired his rifle. The enemy soldier went down. Thanks, he said to Lyrison. You are getting good at this. She smiled, though her hands were shaking. I have good teachers. The last group of Vorthan soldiers was trapped near their landing craft. They fought desperately, but it was hopeless. Human Marines and Zephyrian civilians surrounded them on all sides. Surrender, Colonel Hayes called out in the Vorthan language. You have fought well, but it is over. The enemy soldiers looked at each other, then threw down their weapons. They were beaten, and they knew it. In space, the final phase of the battle was beginning. The ESS Leviathan moved toward the Bone Crusher, Admiral Morrison's flagship, targeting the Vorthan command ship. This is Admiral Morrison, he broadcast on all frequencies. War Master Krelthox, your fleet is defeated. Surrender now, and we will spare your remaining ships. On the Bone Crusher's bridge, Krelthox stared at the approaching human dreadnought. His proud flagship was dying around him. Fires burned on multiple decks. Half his crew was dead or wounded. "War Master," Commander Velenik said quietly, "we should surrender. We cannot win this battle." Krelthok's scarred face twisted with rage and shame. He had never surrendered in his life. But he looked around at his burning bridge and his dead crew members. How many more would die for his pride? "Signal the human admiral," he said finally. Tell him we yield." The message went out across the battlefield. The surviving Vorthan ships stopped firing and powered down their weapons. The great fleet that had come to conquer was now asking for mercy. Admiral Morrison received the surrender message on his bridge. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Cease fire. The battle is over." The guns fell silent. In the sudden quiet, the only sounds were the crackling of damaged systems and the distant explosions of dying ships. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Black reported, "we have won. 43 Vorthan ships are surrendering. The rest are destroyed or have fled the system." Morrison nodded with satisfaction. "Signal the colony. Tell them they are safe." On the planet's surface, the news of victory spread quickly. In the ruins of the colony, humans and Zephyrians celebrated together. Children who had been hiding in fear now ran around laughing and playing. Elder Vextar stood in what had been the colony's main plaza. Most of the buildings were destroyed, but his people were alive. That was what mattered most. A transport ship landed nearby, and Admiral Morrison stepped out. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He walked over to where Vextar was waiting. "Elder Vextar," Morrison said, "I apologize for taking so long to get here. We came as soon as we received your message." Vextar looked at the human admiral with wonder. "You came," he said simply. "After all these years, you actually came." Morrison clasped the alien's shoulder gently. "We gave our word 20 years ago. Humans do not break promises to friends." Tears ran down Vextar's blue cheeks. "Many of my people thought you had forgotten us." "Never," Morrison said firmly. "Earth never forgets its allies. We may be busy with our own problems, but we always remember our commitments." Around them, human Marines and Zephyrian civilians worked together to clear the rubble and tend to the wounded. The two species moved side by side, helping each other despite their differences. Lyrisen approached the two leaders. She had bandages on her arms from the fighting, but she was smiling. "Admiral Morrison," she said, "thank you for saving us. But our colony is destroyed. Where will we go now?" Morrison smiled. "You will rebuild, of course. And this time, you will not be alone. Earth is establishing a permanent naval base in this system. We will help you construct a new colony, one that can defend itself." "A permanent base?" Vextar asked. 50 ships and 10,000 personnel, Morrison confirmed. "We will not let this happen again." Over the following days, more human ships arrived. Construction vessels brought supplies and equipment. Medical ships treated the wounded. The destroyed colony began to rise again, but this time it was built stronger. Human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian builders. The new colony would have better defenses and stronger shelters. More importantly, it would have human protectors. Living right next door, children from both species played together in the construction sites. They chased each other around the building materials, laughing and shouting. The young ones adapted quickly to their new mixed community. Sergeant Kelly Moore decided to stay on the planet when her tour ended. She married a Zephyrian engineer named Dexenal and opened a security training school. Many young Zephyrians signed up to learn how to defend their world. The story of the Battle of Kepler 442b spread throughout the galaxy. Other species heard how humans had traveled across space to honor an old treaty. They learned that Earth kept its promises. no matter how difficult or dangerous. Some alien governments that had been considering conflicts with human colonies changed their minds. If Earth would fight so hard for a small mining colony, what would they do to protect their own worlds? Elder Vextar lived to see his people prosper in their new home. The colony grew larger and stronger every year. Human families came to live alongside the Zephyrians. The two species learned from each other and became true friends. 25 years later, when Vextar was very old, he stood in the same plaza where he had first met Admiral Morrison. The colony was now a thriving city with tall buildings and busy streets. Human and Zephyrian children played together in the parks. A young Zephyrian girl ran up to him. "Grandfather Vextar," she said, "tell us the story again."